What year did you get involved with Palestine?
I got involved with Palestine the year that I met Reeby, and that was 1963. And this very charming and very handsome man sat down at my table, and I was working in Chicago, and I was living at the YWCA. And he sat down at my table for breakfast, and he asked me if he could have coffee with me. And I was so charmed. He was handsome. He looked like Omar Sharif. And the rest is sort of history. That was in July of 1963. I became really active right after the Six-Day War, mostly because I was so enraged over what Israel had done to the Palestinians, the Arabs in general, certainly the Palestinians specifically.
And how many times have you actually been to Palestine?
Well, I would say since the year 2000, I've been to the West Bank 3 times, and I've been to Gaza once. The other times that I had gone with family. I had gone in the 70s, for example, but I wasn't particularly active with the Palestinian search for justice then. There wasn't an awful lot going on. So from, I'd say, the year 2000 until now, it's been a total of about 9 months in the West Bank, and then of course I was on the first boat to Gaza in August of 2008.
How many people were involved in the Free Gaza movement when it was founded?
Well, there were only 5 of us that really founded it. We founded it in mostly in California. It was Mary Hughes Thompson and Paul DeRudy and me, and then 2 young women from the UK, Renee Boyer and Sharon Locke. And we were the 5 originators of the Free Gaza movement. There have been a lot of people talking about what are we going to do about Gaza because Israel was busy attacking Lebanon. So we were really the ones that implemented it. There were a lot of people who were talking about sailing boats, but we were the ones that actually did it.
Just thinking back, to put this in perspective, was there a wall around Gaza at that stage, or?
Yes. There's been a wall around Gaza forever. It used to be a huge steel wall, and it was blown up sometime in the last few years. When we got there in 2008, that big steel wall had just been demolished, but they had put up big stone walls in between Gaza and Egypt. And then all around the border of Israel and Gaza, there is barbed wire, there are 20-foot fences, there are minefields, there are whatever that the Israelis can think of to do to keep the people from Gaza from cultivating their land.
So there was a wall around Gaza even when Israelis were living within Gaza itself?
Yes, there was a wall around Gaza even then. And then there was a wall around the illegal settlements, and then there were additional checkpoints, and there were additional walls. You couldn't get from one end of Gaza to the other, and Gaza's only 35 miles long. Those are all gone because they withdrew their illegal settlers, and then they shut the gates and locked them up. 1.5 million people.
How much worse is the situation in Gaza compared to the West Bank in general? And has it, do you think, deteriorated faster than the situation in the West Bank has deteriorated?
You know, it's hard to quantify those 2 different areas. They're so completely separated. Gaza doesn't see any of the soldiers. It doesn't have midnight raids. It doesn't have their young people arrested all of the time the way the Palestinians in the West Bank are. It doesn't have checkpoints. It doesn't have flying checkpoints. It doesn't have the military stomping in and out of their cities all the time. What Israel did with Gaza is they erected a wall around Gaza, and they locked the gates, and they turned it into the biggest open-air prison in the world. I call it a concentration camp because that's what they've done. They've concentrated the people in one place. They can't leave. They can't come in. They can't do the things that you and I do. They can't trade. It's really hard for them to get out for an education. So in one case, it's an open-air prison, which is what Gaza is. On the West Bank, it's occupied territory with all that that entails. Soldiers, tanks, military checkpoints, people having their homes raided in the middle of the night. So the people in Gaza don't see any of the Israelis anymore. They just see the bombs that get dropped on them by drones.
How long do you think before there'll be a resolution between Gaza, the West Bank, and Israel that's going to last and go the distance?
Well, you can,
and end the occupation, basically.
You can do it tomorrow if Israel wants to. Look, it's not up to the occupied to make the conditions. It's up to the occupier. That's always been true. So when the occupier decides they've had enough of this, they can change it in a few days. I mean, they used to say, how long is it going to be before the Berlin Wall fell? And it fell. How long is it going to be before apartheid in South Africa is gone? And it's gone. This hard situation for the Palestinians and for the Israelis will go as well. It's going to be up to the Israelis, who are going to have to say, however, we've had enough.
I want you to put a number of years on it.
Oh, you want me to put a number of years on it?
I want a guesstimate.
Okay, I'll say what I say all the time. Israel will not make its 70th birthday in the state that it is in right now. It didn't last more than 70 years the first time. It's not going to last more than 70 years this time. That does not mean it's going to disappear, nor do I want it to disappear. It's simply not going to exist as the apartheid state that it is right now.
How do you see the difference between the discussions on Facebook and what happens on the ground and in protests and closer to real life? Do you think that you cop more flack on Facebook than you do as... Do you think you cop more flack on Facebook as an activist by being online? Do you think it actually improves your ability to act, or do you think it impedes it because you have so much feedback that maybe you wouldn't want to hear?
That's actually a good question, because it's not just about me. It's about any of us who have been with the International Solidarity Movement, or we've been with the Free Gaza Movement. Our feet have been on the ground. We put our feet where our mouth is. We don't just talk it up. We actually went, we participated, we bore witness to what was going on. So it's hard for the Zionists to counter our arguments, because I was shot with a rubber-coated steel bullet, for example, in 2003. I've been tear gassed. I've been dragged along the ground. I've been put into paddy wagons. I've been hauled all over the place, especially in the West Bank. So it's hard for them to argue. So what they end up doing is, rather than debating on facts, they start demonizing those of us who have been there, calling us names, calling us all kinds of epithets, because they really can't win on the facts. So I would say that Facebook, in particular, has its place. My friend Audrey asked me whether or not we had made any changes to anybody who was on Facebook, and both you and I, Yanni, said yes, we have. We have seen changes. We have seen people on Facebook who started out being Zionists and who have said, I didn't know this, I'm going to do more research, and they've changed their mind. So if you have to do it one at a time, then we do it one at a time. But the two physical things that I'm a part of, and that many of us are a part of, is, and that's why I've got my shirt on, it's called Gaza Ark, is Gaza Ark, which is going to be a boat that leaves Gaza and sails to Europe. Rather than coming into Gaza, this boat's going to leave Gaza filled with products and go to Europe. And anybody who's interested in it can easily find it by just going to GazaArk.org. And it's a marvelous initiative, because we always tried with the boats to do one thing or two things different every single time, whether it was a flotilla or bringing in important people, or getting different kinds of boats. This time it's a boat that's leaving Gaza, going to Europe. It's putting Palestinians to work. A lot of them are working on the boat. And we'd be curious to see how the Israelis are going to stop that, because it's leaving Gaza. It's not coming in. That's the first thing. Then three of us who are interested in setting up a micro business for some of the women in Gaza who have kind of been overlooked. They are either mothers or wives of prisoners, or they've been prisoners themselves. So we're going in to set up a micro business, and we're also going in to teach them how to knit and how to crochet, and they're going to teach us how to embroider. And what we're hoping to do is bring in as many raw materials as we can and bring out the finished product. We already have 3 organizations who are willing to buy the product that we bring out, and that's going to be my good friend Mary Hughes Thompson, again, one of the founders of Free Gaza, and another woman whose name is Sinead McLaughlin, who has taken in several delegations from Ireland. We hope to be able to go, I would hope, either at the very end of this year or the beginning of next year. So we've got lots on our plate already.
How are you going with financial support for those projects? I mean, I think we should get a plug in here.
Yeah, I think Gaza Ark is the one that's the most urgent right now because they're trying to raise $300,000. They've raised about half of that. And it's hard. People are tired. They're tired, and running boats is expensive. And in some cases, they are probably even discouraged, but they shouldn't be discouraged on this one. It's a really, really marvelous project. There's enough money to finish the boat. There's enough money to get the boat retrofitted. Then they're going to have to worry about just the simple things: getting fuel, getting supplies, buying the products, getting people there, getting them on board. So they still have $150,000 to raise. I think they will. I think the closer it gets to their leaving, the more people will jump on board.
How long have they been fundraising for so far?
But I remember what it was like when we were trying to raise money on that first trip. You know, ultimately we raised close to $700,000 by the time the trip was completely done. But we had started in 2006, and we didn't go until August of 2008. And it took us 2 years just to get enough money for the boats and to outfit the boats and to pay for the fuel. And once they realized we were starting, that we really were going to go, the money started to pour in. People wanted to be part of it. I think the smallest donation we got was $1.50 from somebody in Burma, and the largest was $100,000. And all of that money went to the boats and sending those first 2 boats. Once we were successful, it was a lot easier to raise the money. They're working on the boat. They've got the boat. I think they're putting a new captain's quarters on it right now. They're retrofitting the hull of the boat. Boat's already been bought. It's being worked on right now. And again, if people are really interested, they just need to go to GazaArk.org and look it up. It's amazing. It's an amazing initiative, and it's as we've tried to do all along. It's different. It's different. This time we're leaving Gaza. What are they going to do? Are they going to blow the boat up or stop the boat as it leaves Gaza? The people in Gaza have the right to trade. They don't want aid. They want trade. They have aid because they don't have any choice. But they want trade and not aid. And so if you continue to push that boundary of saying you have no right to stop them, you have no right to stop us for going in. We got in successfully 5 times, but you certainly have no right to stop us from leaving.
What about poverty? Let's have a bit of a chat about what poverty is and what that means to the overall dimensions of things. Yeah.
I think that's the hardest thing to witness. The Palestinians are highly educated. They are very ambitious. Their literacy rate is right underneath Israel's literacy rate. And Israel has done everything that it can to destroy that, by destroying their schools, by destroying their textbooks, by bombing the crap out of their schools in Gaza. Because if you can make your population illiterate, you can certainly contain them and control them a lot better. So what has happened to the Palestinians in both of those locations is that their standard of living has continuously gone down, where maybe the rest of the world has gone up. And so every once in a while you'll see a statement saying, well, the Palestinians' GDP went up 12% last year. Yes, 12% from what? And so I think that it's very hard to witness some of the things that we have seen. It's amazing to me how determined the Palestinians are in general, and how patient they are. If it's not my son, it will be my grandson. If it's not my grandson, it will be my great-granddaughter. That kind of thing. Those of us in the West don't understand that at all. We have instant gratification. The Palestinians have what they call samud, which is patience. I was married the first time to a Palestinian, as I said, who was so handsome and dashing. And actually, when he told me he was a Palestinian in 1963, I thought he was a Pakistani. I had never heard of the word Palestinian before I met him. And then when he told me about what had happened to him in Safa, that's where he comes from, that he fought in the 1948 war, I became outraged, not because the Palestinians lost, but because I had been lied to my entire life. I had seen Exodus. I thought, isn't this wonderful? The Jews need to have a home. Look at those horrible people on the other side. I didn't realize that in order to found Israel, they had to drive 750,000 Palestinians out. And so I think my sense of outrage became my central motivation. And certainly when I had children, that was true. When I remarried in 1979, I married somebody who was Jewish, who, when I knew him, was an anti-Zionist Jew. And one of the things that he said to me on our first date was, you have to read The 13th Tribe by Arthur Koestler, because we're not really Jewish, we're really Khazars. And again, I had never heard of any of this, nor had I ever heard of the 13th Tribe. So I married, although people say, how can you marry an Arab and then marry a Jew? They were kind of the same person. They had the same point of view, they had the same love of family, they had the same outgoing personality, they were both very smart. And it wasn't much of a stretch. They even looked alike. And so when people call me anti-Semitic, I always laugh, because if anybody has the right to be anti-Semitic, I do. I think that, I remember out of the 44 people that ultimately ended up being on board our boat, I would bet you that half of them never told their parents or their children that they were going to be there. In fact, on that first trip, we made a decision that we were not going to take anybody who had small children. And then the only person on board that first trip that had small children was Lauren Booth. And she's the sister-in-law of Tony Blair. And we really had to think hard before we said, okay, is the PR value of Lauren Booth important enough that she wanted to go, is it important enough that we waive that qualification that we don't want to have anybody who has small children? And of course, on that first trip, everybody was fine. But we made very sure that they didn't have small children at home, just in case. And if you look at the 9 men that were murdered on board the Mavi Marmara, almost half of them had small children. The only weapon that they were holding was a camera. And in fact, Israel managed to murder all 9 people because they had cameras in their hands. So they left a lot of fatherless children.
So on the deaths on the flotilla, do you think that people were prepared to fight the Israeli soldiers, that they'd cut pipes off and ready to bang them over the head? Or do you think that was even reasonable or fair if it occurred? And you know, should the Israelis have actually landed on the boat regardless?
Well, first of all, the Israelis had no business landing any place in international waters. We were 65 miles off the coast of Gaza, or off the coast of Israel, and the boat was heading out to sea. So they didn't have any right to board those boats, and they boarded all 6 of those boats. They did not board just the Mavi Marmara, and they beat up passengers on board all of those boats, and they broke people's noses. On our own boat, we had one young woman whose nose was broken. We had a lot of women. The Challenger 1, which was the Free Gaza boat, was staffed mostly by women. It was as close to being a woman's boat as you could get, except for the crew. And they tied the women up. They put bags over their heads. They threw them in the back of the boat, which is against maritime law. Threw them through windows. So it wasn't just the Mavi Marmara. And the only resistance that those women put up is that they made a ring around the captain's quarters so that he could continue to move the boat fast. As far as the people on board the Mavi Marmara, what I think is interesting that nobody ever talks about is the young men that picked up they weren't pipes, they were the bottoms of aluminum deck chairs, like the aluminum deck chairs that you see. They had ripped the legs off the aluminum deck chairs. But none of those people who were defending the Mavi Marmara were shot. The people that were shot were the people who were holding the cameras. They were the bystanders. Do I personally think they had the right to defend the boat? I believe in nonviolence if it's at all possible, and I wasn't there. So I don't have any right to judge what they tried to do. You know, I mean, I was raised by parents who were extraordinarily progressive, very liberal. And one of the things they said to me all the time is, whatever you do, don't have a boring life. And I haven't had a boring life. It's been a very interesting life, from, as you said, teaching in an all-black school in Chicago to being married to a Palestinian, to, I don't know, going to an all-boys school, military school, when I was junior and senior in high school. I think if I were going to leave a final message for anyone, it's that you really can make a difference. Especially nowadays where people are planning wars in Syria or invasions in Mali. The average person thinks, I can't do anything. There's nothing that I can do. I can't change anything. But it's not true. Civil society is going to have to be the entity that changes everything. Whether you're going out to march for Snowden or whether you're going out to march against the wars, it makes a difference. You saw the difference. We made a sea change in the way people saw Gaza. And we were nothing but a bunch of activists and people who were crazy enough to go out and buy 2 boats, sail them to Gaza, and not have enough common sense to say we couldn't do that. So if I would say anything to anybody, it's really, you cannot deny the fact that civil society can do a wonderful job. It can do a wonderful job, but you have to do it, and you have to be determined. It's not about money. It's not about who you know. It's about how determined you are that you're going to make a difference. And it does happen. You see it over and over again.